Okay, so let's imagine this scenario. You're prepping for a job interview, and it's for a drainage engineer position. You've got all the technical know-how, but those interviews, they can always throw some unexpected questions your way, right? So what are they really looking for in a candidate? Well, that's what we're diving into today. We're going to look at some common interview questions for drainage engineers to help you kind of decode what's going on in the interviewer's mind and hopefully ace that interview.
I think that's a really smart strategy. Drainage engineering is honestly more vital than most people realize. We're talking about things that affect everyone, public health safety, environmental protection. It's all connected. So interviewers really need to be sure that you get the impact of this work.
Right. And to help us unpack this, we've got excerpts from a recent Indeed article that breaks down some common questions. And it even provides some sample answers. It's like getting a little peek behind the curtain. And one thing that really stood out to me was the emphasis on communication skills. They want problem solvers, of course, but they also really want people who can communicate effectively. Why is that so crucial in this particular field?
Well, because in drainage engineering, you're never working in isolation. You're always going to be interacting with so many different people. City planners, construction crews, even the public. Imagine trying to explain a really complex drainage plan to someone who's maybe never even looked at a blueprint before. You need to be clear, concise, and able to adjust how you explain things based on who you're talking to.
So it's not just about knowing all the technical stuff, it's about making sure everyone is on the same page and understands what's happening.
That makes a lot of sense. So let's actually dive into some of the technical questions that the article highlighted. The first one is, how would you approach the design of a brand new drainage system?
Hmm.
Now, the sample answer mentions things like assessing the location and environmental factors, but I have a feeling there's a lot more nuance to uncover here. What do you think?
Oh, definitely. When interviewers say unique environmental factors, they're really digging deep. It's not just about the rainfall or the temperature. It's about understanding the really specific conditions of that particular site. Take soil type, for example.
Mhm.
If you have dense clay soil, its permeability is very low, meaning water drains really slowly. And that could really increase the risk of flooding. But on the other hand, sandy soil drains super quickly, which could then lead to erosion if it's not managed properly. So your design has to consider all these differences right from the beginning. It's amazing how something like soil composition can totally change how you approach a project. What other environmental factors come into play during those initial assessments?
Well, you have to think about the topography, the existing vegetation, even the local wildlife. Is the site on a slope? Are there any wetlands nearby? All of those things influence the choices you make in your design. You might need to incorporate different kinds of pipes, retention ponds, or even, green infrastructure solutions
Yeah.
like bioswales or rain gardens. It all depends on the environmental context.
It really is like a giant puzzle, isn't it? Figuring out how to manage water in a way that works for both people and the environment. So let's move on to another question from the article. What steps do you take to make sure a project is safe when you're installing a drainage system? They mention risk assessment and safety protocols in the article, but what are some specifics that a candidate could mention that would really make them stand out?
I think showing that you can go beyond the textbook and think about real-world applications is key. So mentioning very specific safety protocols that are relevant to drainage work, that will really set you apart. For example, you could talk about trench shoring techniques that are used to prevent collapses, especially in unstable soil conditions. Or you could bring up the proper procedures for working in confined spaces, like large drainage pipes, where ventilation and gas monitoring are super important.
Those are definitely details that someone who hasn't actually been on a job site wouldn't necessarily think about. It really shows you understand the practical side of the work.
Exactly. And I actually learned this lesson pretty early on in my career. We were installing this large drainage pipe under a busy road. And one of the workers tried to skip shoring up the trench. Luckily, I caught it before it turned into a disaster. But that experience really showed me how important it is to follow the protocols, no matter how small the task seems.
Wow, that's a perfect example of why experience is so valuable. Speaking of challenging situations, the article also asks, what are some methods you use to solve complex problems? And the sample answer is pretty general, so how can a listener frame their response to really stand out?
Well, instead of just describing a general problem-solving process, try using a very specific scenario related to drainage. So imagine a major storm hits, and a really important drainage pipe bursts under a bridge. Walk the interviewer through your steps. First, you assess the damage and any immediate risks, like traffic safety. Then you prioritize the tasks, diverting traffic, securing the site, contacting repair crews. This shows you can think clearly under pressure and act decisively, which is a crucial skill in this field.
It's so much more impactful when you paint that clear picture and show you can handle those high-pressure situations. Now, the article also gets into some behavioral questions, focusing on how you deal with interpersonal challenges. Let's start with, how do you deal with difficult clients? Because honestly, they exist in every profession, right?
Oh, absolutely. And this is where those communication skills we talked about earlier become so important. It's about finding that balance between empathy and firmness. You need to acknowledge their concerns, but you can't compromise on safety or best practices. Active listening is really powerful in these situations, paraphrasing their concerns back to them. To show that you understand what they're saying, you could say something like, "It sounds like you're worried about the potential noise pollution during construction. That's a valid concern. Let's talk about some strategies we can put in place to minimize that."
That approach really makes you a partner in finding solutions, not an adversary. It shows you're taking their input seriously. Another behavioral question they highlight is, how do you stay up to date on all the technical stuff? Conferences and webinars are kind of the obvious answers. But are there some maybe lesser known resources that would really impress an interviewer?
There are definitely some very well-respected resources within the drainage engineering community that show you're really going the extra mile. The Journal of Hydraulic Engineering, for example, it's considered a leading publication in the field, and it will keep you on top of all the latest research and advancements. There are also a lot of online forums and communities specifically for drainage engineering. They can offer great insights, and it's a chance to connect with other professionals.
So it's about being actively engaged in the field, not just passively attending a conference here and there. Now, before we move on, the article really stresses the importance of field experience. Why is it so vital in drainage engineering?
Because there's a huge difference between textbook knowledge and what you encounter in the real world. You can learn all the formulas and design principles in a classroom, but until you've actually been in the field, facing unexpected obstacles, dealing with changing conditions, you don't really understand what it takes to be a successful drainage engineer.
It's about taking all that theoretical knowledge and turning it into practical skills and understanding those nuances that only come with hands-on experience.
Exactly. There's so many lessons you learn from those real-world challenges that you just can't get from a textbook.
We're going to pause here and pick back up in part 2, where we'll dig into some even more insightful questions and tips to help you nail that drainage engineer interview. Stay tuned.
Welcome back.
I'm ready for more interview insights.
You too.
We were just talking about how important field experience is. Do you have any stories from your early days that really highlight those on-the-ground lessons?
You know, one thing that really stands out to me is just how important it is to be adaptable. Like in school, everything's so predictable.
Yeah.
But in the field, you're always encountering the unexpected. I remember working on this project once. We were excavating for a new drainage system, and we kept hitting these massive boulders that weren't on any of the maps.
Oh, wow. So what did you do?
Well, we had to completely rethink our approach right there on the spot. It meant bringing in heavier equipment, adjusting the timeline, and getting creative with our installation methods. That experience really taught me to think on my feet and adjust to changing circumstances, which is essential in drainage engineering.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So let's get back to that Indeed article and those interview questions. One that caught my eye was, explain your experience with stormwater management systems. Seems pretty broad. What do you think interviewers are really getting at with a question like that?
I think they're trying to assess how deep your knowledge of stormwater management really is. Do you understand the different techniques, the pros and cons of each one? Can you explain things like retention ponds versus infiltration basins, or the principles behind green infrastructure approaches, like bioswales and rain gardens?
So it's about showing them you're up to date on current trends and that you can clearly explain the differences between all the various approaches. Exactly. And they also want to know if you can actually connect that knowledge to real projects you've worked on. Have you actually worked with these systems? What were the challenges? How did you address them? Did you have to meet any strict environmental regulations, work within a tight budget? Those kinds of details really show that you can apply your knowledge, not just talk about it.
Right. Sharing those real-world examples really gives the interviewer a much clearer picture of your capabilities. The article also includes some questions that focus more on your work style. One is, describe a time you had to creatively solve a project issue. What advice would you give for tackling a question like that?
Tell a story. Don't just state the problem and the solution. Really set the scene for the interviewer. Describe the obstacles. Walk them through your thought process. And highlight the impact of your solution. Did it save time or money? Did it improve the overall design? Make sure the interviewer understands why your solution was innovative and what positive outcomes it achieved.
It's about showing them you can solve problems, not just telling them you're a good problem solver. Do you have a story that comes to mind? One you might share in an interview?
Sure, I was once tasked with installing a drainage system across this really steep, heavily wooded hillside.
Hmm.
The conventional approach would have meant removing a lot of trees, which would have been really damaging to the environment and expensive. So I proposed using horizontal directional drilling. It's a trenchless method that allowed us to install the pipes underground with minimal disruption to the surface. So we protected the trees
Hmm.
and saved the client a lot of money.
That's a great example. It highlights your creativity,
Yeah.
your environmental awareness, and your ability to find cost-effective solutions. Now, speaking of challenges, the article also throws in this question. Describe a time you had to deal with a significant project failure. What did you learn from it?
That one can feel a little intimidating. Yeah, it's definitely a tough question, but it's a valuable one for interviewers. It shows them how you handle adversity and whether you're capable of learning and growing from your setbacks. The key is to be honest and self-aware. Don't try to downplay the failure. Own it, but then shift the focus to what you learned.
So it's not about dwelling on the negative, but about using it as a chance for reflection and growth. Do you have any advice on how to frame those learning experiences in a way that really resonates with interviewers?
Absolutely. You could say something like, early in my career, I underestimated the importance of thorough site investigations. On one project, we didn't fully understand the soil conditions, and we ended up having major problems with settling and drainage. It was a costly mistake, but it taught me a crucial lesson about meticulous planning and the importance of not cutting corners. By highlighting the lesson you learned, you're showing that you've grown from the experience and become a better engineer because of it.
It shows accountability and a commitment to improvement, which are qualities any employer would value. The article also asks about workload management and meeting deadlines, which is important in any engineering field. What strategies would you recommend highlighting in an interview?
Prioritization and organization are key. You need to be able to figure out the most urgent tasks and manage your time well. Breaking down large projects into smaller, more manageable steps can make the workload feel less overwhelming and help you stay on track. Tools like to-do lists, project management software, or even just a well-organized calendar can be really helpful.
So it's not just about working hard, it's about working smart and having systems in place to keep everything organized. Any other advice for showcasing those organizational skills?
Don't be afraid to talk about delegation. Knowing when and how to delegate tasks effectively is crucial, especially as you move up in your career. It shows that you're a team player and that you can manage resources well.
That's a great point. It also shows that you're not afraid to ask for help when you need it, which is a strength, not a weakness. We've covered a lot of ground here. Is there anything else our listeners should keep in mind as they prepare for their drainage engineering interviews?
One final thought. Research the company you're interviewing with. Take the time to understand their projects, their values, their culture. It lets you tailor your answers to their specific needs and shows genuine interest, which interviewers always appreciate.
It's like doing your homework before a big test. The more you know about the company, the better prepared you'll be to answer their questions and ask insightful questions of your own. Now, before we wrap up part 2, I want to touch on something we haven't explicitly discussed yet. We've talked a lot about what the interviewers are looking for, but what about what you, the candidate, should be looking for? An interview is a two-way street, right?
Oh, that's such a good point. You're absolutely right. It's not just about impressing them. It's also about deciding if this company and this role are the right fit for you.
So how can our listeners approach an interview with that mindset? What are some questions they could ask to get a better sense of the company and the position?
Asking insightful questions shows that you're engaged and that you're thinking critically about your future with the company. You could try asking, what are some of the biggest challenges facing the drainage engineering team right now? That gives you some insight into the types of projects you'd be working on and their priorities. Another good one is, what are the opportunities for professional development and growth within the company? It shows that you're thinking long-term and interested in advancing your career.
Those are great questions. They show that you're not just looking for any job, you're looking for the right fit. Now, we've talked a lot about technical skills and experience, but I have a feeling there's more to acing an interview than that.
You're right. One thing that's often overlooked is enthusiasm. Interviewers want to see your passion for drainage engineering. They want to see that you're excited about the challenges and opportunities in this field.
So it's about showing your genuine interest, And letting your personality shine through.
Exactly. Let them see you as a problem solver, a creative thinker, someone who's genuinely eager to contribute. A little enthusiasm can go a long way.
We're going to take a quick pause here and come back for the final part of this deep dive, where we'll wrap up with some final thoughts on how to really stand out and land that dream drainage engineering job. Stay with us.
And we're back for the final part of our deep dive into acing those drainage engineer interviews.
Yeah, we've really covered a lot, haven't we?
We have, from all the technical details to the importance of communication,
Yeah,
adaptability, and even those tough behavioral questions. It's been a lot.
it has.
But as we wrap things up, keep thinking about something. We talk about how to showcase all your skills and experience. But how do you actually bring in those less tangible things like passion and genuine interest? You can't just say, I'm passionate in an interview, right? Right, you can't just state it. You have to show it. One way to do that is to connect your enthusiasm to something specific about the job or the company. Like, let's say the company is known for its sustainable design practices, and that's something you're really passionate about. Find a way to work that into your answers.
So instead of just saying, I'm interested in sustainability, you could say something like,
I'm really impressed with your company's commitment to green infrastructure solutions.
yeah.
I'm especially interested in the work you've done with bioswales. In my last role, I got to design a bioswales system for a new park. And it was so rewarding to see how it not only managed stormwater runoff,
Yeah.
but also made the park look even better.
That's a much better way to show your passion. You're not just talking about it in general, you're connecting it to real experience.
Exactly.
Now, before we wrap up this deep dive completely, I want to leave our listeners with a final thought. We've talked about all the traditional interview prep, but the world of drainage engineering is always changing, right? So what are some of the emerging trends that really excite you? And how would you share that enthusiasm with a potential employer?
That's a great question to think about before an interview. One trend that I'm really excited about is resilient infrastructure design. With climate change and more extreme weather, we need drainage systems that can handle those challenges. I think it's really important for anyone going into this field to be aware of that and show that they're forward-thinking.
So how would you bring that up in an interview without sounding like you're giving them a lecture on climate change?
Well, you could say something like, I'm really interested in how drainage engineering can help create more resilient communities. I've been reading about some really innovative approaches to stormwater management, ones that mimic natural systems. And I'm excited to learn more about how your company is incorporating those ideas into its designs.
That shows you're not just looking for a job. You're looking to be part of the solution.
Exactly.
It shows you're engaged, you're curious, and you're thinking beyond just the day-to-day tasks.
I think that's a great way to put it.
Well, I think we've given our listeners a lot to think about today. Remember, acing that interview isn't just about what you know technically. It's about showing them how you solve problems, how you communicate, and your genuine passion for this field. So go out there, be confident, be prepared, and most importantly, be yourself. Good luck. Good luck.